One hasn't lived a fully self-actualized life if you haven't been to a community college commencement. I mean, you know, those days are just so sweet, and we embrace those days and we embrace those students. But as a transition to today's event, we know here in New Jersey, Virginia, other states, not as many students get to that finish line as we like. And an important part of that conversation to get more students to those wonderful commencement days with their families and with us is to reform and transform developmental education. Mercer's a leader here. Let me, by way of introduction of Dr. Donahue, brag on her a bit. I live in Mercer County, so forgive me, I'm entitled to be especially proud about Mercer County Community College. So many good things going on here, and we were just talking, Pat and I, and time flies when you're having a good time. It didn't seem to me possible when she said she's in her 7th year at Mercer, but she is, and she's transformed this place, and pretty busy in doing that, as your presidents are, but we're so grateful for our presidents. They have put all of this in motion, this Big Ideas project, and this is Big Idea 1. I don't know at the time that we ordered them in any sense of priority, but I think if we had, it would have been appropriate to say Big Idea number 1 should be all about developmental education. And Pat, of our 19 presidents, we have presidents assigned, so to speak, to lead these different big ideas, and Pat has been the go-to president on this important assignment and has been working with our academic officers who have been leading this charge, and we're so grateful to her for taking time from the busy life of being a president here at Mercer County Community College to lead these statewide efforts. We're making great progress. Thanks for coming back a second day, and let's get started by welcoming Dr. Donahue.
Well, thank you, Larry, and welcome to Mercer County Community College to all of you. It's always my pleasure to welcome groups here, but especially my colleagues from across the state. And especially when I looked at the hands of how many of you have come back to help take this project to the 2nd level. I know Larry just said I've transformed this place, but the truth is I'm just the primary leader. This place is transforming because faculty and staff and deans across the college have stepped up and moved forward with innovation in the same sense that you're here today to keep working on how we can all cause improvement. And we can't succeed for the students, but we can set up the scenario, we can remove barriers, we can put them in the right place, we can provide good instruction, and that's what all of you do. So I want to start by thanking you for what you do. That's before I challenge you to do even more and to work hard today to continue stepping forward on that. It really has been my privilege to work very closely with the chief academic officers, to watch them on almost a monthly basis. I can't quite always get there. Really grapple with these issues and work on not only how each of our colleges is addressing the issues of student success and how do we improve developmental education and how do we improve the support we give our adjunct faculty and those many questions. But your chief academic officers really are very innovative, they're very thoughtful, they're very complete and conscientious about their discussions. So when they come back and ask you to engage in a project, none of those have happened without really rigorous thought and debate in trying to figure out where they're going. Now, one of my jobs in starting this, and it's a little easier today because many of you have been here, is to recap very briefly what's happened over the last 3 years since the community college trustees and presidents had an initial retreat, and it really had a couple of thoughts. One of them was the completion agenda is big. What's the completion challenge going to mean for all of us? And what are we going to have to do differently to get a different result, to get more students completing? At the same time, it's 3 years ago, we're already into this recession. the earmarks about what's going to happen to our funding, the inability of the state to provide more money, the really money-strapped counties that we depend on. So part of our question was also, how do we operate more efficiently? How do we deploy our resources in ways that will keep our colleges strong, keep the excellence that we're all proud of, and allow us to do the initiatives to innovate in ways that increase student success? And this has been very challenging. Our trustees are very supportive of this direction. They are counting on all of us to make those things happen. Now, most of you have heard before there were 8 big ideas, because we're from New Jersey and we are too busy working on these big ideas to think of a better name than the Big Ideas Project. So we have not wasted time on the name. We got busy on the work, and I think everybody deserves a lot of credit for that. Big Idea 1 is the one you're here for today primarily, about transforming developmental education. And all of our campuses were already trying to do something, but what we have really done is we've set up a Center for Student Success, we've gathered a lot of research, we've done a lot of benchmarking, and with the guidance of our chief academic officers, we've also gathered data so we can benchmark who's trying what in the state, what are they happy with, what aren't they happy with, what do we think we should replicate or try to generate in a new way. So we are implementing redesign in a variety of ways and trying to use research to test out what's working. And I think that's very important. You can always just keep trying new things and throwing something out because it didn't have the result you wanted the first time. But the truth is, most of the time, you need to tweak, you need to improve, and you need data to know whether what you thought happened did or did not happen. We have been from the beginning supporting the role of faculty leadership in this. That is why many of you are here, because we know the improvement of developmental education actually happens in the classroom. It happens where the students are. So having our faculty really be the leaders in the project and help promote, how do we get more students in developmental education to a successful conclusion and actually into college credit level courses? Because those numbers have not been great. You know, there's been a lot of complaining that so many students come in testing into developmental, the high schools didn't do a good job with them. And the truth is, when we started this project, if you compared the numbers, after we get them, we didn't do much better than they did. So this effort and our admission that it's not about whether the student did a good job and mastered everything by themselves, it's whether we helped facilitate the ability of that student to learn. It's our job to help them be successful, and that's really why you're here. The second big idea, which I worked on at the beginning before I became the chief of Big Idea 1, was about aligning community college curriculum with K-12 curriculum, being sure that when students have done what the high schools tell them to do, and they seemingly succeeded in their courses, that those outcomes they've achieved are in fact ready to start with college level courses. This has been a question forever. A number of the presidents met with the vocational school superintendents from around the state the other day, and you know, it's still right there at the front end. What do we do to make it better? We have a proposal before the state at this point for funding, because we've been partnering for most of those 3 years with the Department of Education and the Secretary of Higher Education to smooth out, could we give our AccuPlacer test in the 11th grade so the high schools had chance to do interventions in 12th grade? Give the students the signal early, help them become more ready before they get to us. Now, there's a second step. We're still working on state funding for that, although across this state, there's a district here, a college there that's already doing some or all of that, and how that intervention takes place is different. The second part of that K-12 alignment is the whole Common Core standards going into effect, 42 states across the country. New Jersey is highly involved in PARC, and some of you are people engaged in negotiating what the PARC outcomes look like. And eventually, we will have very important questions in New Jersey that they won't invite us to do, but we have to be sure we're still at the table. And that is, what do those cut scores on PARC become? Because we've agreed that when students achieve the score on PARC that's deemed college ready, we're not going to test them again. So all of the work that's going into building the PARC tests, which they're doing, but input from us, guidance about it, what are the outcomes that really line up, are really critical to us. I'm going to skip real quickly over 3 of the remaining big ideas because they're not really all about academic things. The third one is the student success model, the data, the metrics that we're using, and we looked at what New Jersey used to do. Is it only about college graduates? I think all of you would agree that's not a good way to assess how well we've done with our students. We looked at the voluntary framework of accountability, a national movement that our leading organizations are included in. We looked at the Achieving the Dream standards, and our research people worked together with all of these models, and we came up with our own. So we think we picked the best elements of those and something that's doable, but we are definitely looking at not just what happens in your classroom and does student A succeed through developmental and get into college level courses, but we're going to be looking at the outcomes for everybody. And the game plan here is students need to succeed. What do we do to make sure that happens? Another big idea was about providing more professional development for adjunct faculty. We all agree that's important. There is a statewide initiative working on what might curriculum look like. Again, benchmarking. Some of our colleges have really great orientation or professional development for adjuncts, and our hope is that we all use them better together, and we might even end up with like a certificate that this adjunct has had a basic level of pedagogy that we think will help be more supportive of our students. And finally, some of you I know are engaged, because I know at least Mercer people who are here. Statewide, we are looking at the common learning outcomes for the most common gen ed courses, the courses taken most frequently. I know Jen Ping came into New Jersey just a few months ago, and to second what Larry said earlier, all of this should tell you, as Jen Ping said to me this morning, I'm so glad to be in New Jersey. We're not just talking about this, we're really doing a lot. So my job right now is to empower you to have a great day, really engaging in these topics. And we appreciate what you're doing. Again, I started by thanking you for stepping up, and I'm going to end the same way. What you are doing is critically important to our students and to all of our colleges. So let's get about this work. Thank you.
Good morning. Much better, thank you. I'm Dwight Smith. I'm Vice President of Academic Affairs at County College of Morris, and I serve as chair of the Academic Affairs Affinity Group, which consists of the academic officers of the county colleges here in New Jersey. I want to thank you. Many of you are returning for a second time, and those who are here for the first time, I welcome you as we continue the discussion about transforming developmental education in New Jersey. If we recall what we were facing last November, we certainly were confronted with weather conditions that were, I'm sure some of you may still be experiencing recovery from that time. Sandy was such a rude visitor to New Jersey. But I do want to thank in the organization of this event, as they have done so last November and last week, and we have the Best Practices Conference coming up in another 2 weeks, the New Jersey Council County College staff, Larry Nespoli, Lou Venturelli, and Jake Farman, Marcia Stoltzman, Jim Davey. If you can just wave your hands, I know Jessica Britt, if you could just wave your hands, and let's give a round of applause for their efforts to organize today. I also want to acknowledge my fellow academic officers. As President Donahue indicated, we've been having discussions really for the last 2 to 3 years about developmental education and need to improve student success. So if you can just wave your hands, and I want to thank you for your leadership in providing direction to last fall's summit as well as this summit. Raise of hands again of those who attended last November. Okay, very good. So it looks about half, I would estimate. Those that attended, I'm going to remind you of what you experienced, and those that didn't, want to direct you to some resources that you can get information about the discussion that occurred last November. But last November, we heard from Dr. Yuri Treisman about his efforts in reforming, transforming developmental education throughout the country, his Statway and Quantway efforts through the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning. Carnegie just released findings showing that his efforts are resulting in improved student success in the mathematics developmental ed. We also heard from Professor Peter Adams about the Accelerated Learning Program in English. And by the way, we didn't get around to it, but at the end of the November summit, I know many of you were very interested in having Peter return to the state, and so he has indicated a willingness to do so. So that is a resource we have available to us probably in the fall. And by the way, those who didn't attend last November, up on the YouTube site, you can go to the New Jersey Council of County Colleges and can see the YouTubes of both Dr. Treisman and Professor Adams' presentations last November, and I encourage you to do so. In the afternoon, we had discussions across colleges and within colleges about what was heard and what activities should be considered. And as President Donahue indicated, action has been taken. Lou Venturelli conducted a survey of the county colleges of what actions had been taken since the November summit, and let me highlight what has occurred. We've seen action with regards to accelerated courses at the county colleges in both math and English and developmental ed, the modularization of math courses, implementation strategies for the decision zone, the use of multiple measures and consideration of where to place students in developmental education, the implementation, continuation of summer bridge programs, implementation of computer lab for math developmental ed courses, peer mentor programs for students in developmental ed. A lot has occurred since November at county colleges here in New Jersey to address this issue. And today, we continue that discussion. We're going to hear from 3 excellent speakers who bring additional perspectives about how to improve student success in developmental ed. They bring different perspectives, and I think it will benefit us as we continue our discussions. We will have those discussions this afternoon, as we did last November, to allow you to converse with colleagues from other colleges here in New Jersey and to discuss with your colleagues from your institution about what further actions or how you wish to move forward. And we will conclude the day with the opportunity to hear from you and invite you to share with us what you think our next steps need to be. I think we will hear from, when we hear from Virginia, they're doing some very exciting things, but it has been some 8 years, I believe, that you've been involved in that discussion in addressing restructuring developmental ed in Virginia. And so this is not going to be the last time we talk. To move forward with the day's agenda, I'm going to introduce Dr. Eileen Abel, who has been involved in the organization along with her colleagues, Dr. Guy General and Dr. Karen Hayes, who helped organize and lead the Academic Affairs Affinity Group efforts to address Big Idea 1. Dr. Abel.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I know we're all really looking forward to this day. It's a little remarkable that I made it. I picked up Dr. Levine Brown this morning, and we were so busy gabbing in the car, I missed like 5 turns. And so I think she's doubly happy to be here. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome and to introduce a visionary and energetic developmental education leader, Patty Levine Brown. Levine Brown is a professor of communications at Florida State College at Jacksonville and director of Project Delta, a FIPSI-funded endeavor that works toward finding solutions to meet the national need for improving the retention and success of non-traditional students returning to college. Levine Brown received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Liberal Studies with a specialization in communications and her MPA from the University of North Florida. She's also earned an education specialist in developmental education from Appalachian State, those of us from the South call it Appy State, and has completed her doctoral coursework in higher education at the University of Texas at Austin. In addition, she's completed her coursework through the Kellogg Institute at Appalachian State to become a certified developmental educator, as well as certification in both English and reading from Jacksonville University. She's written in excess of 2,000 articles for local and national publications, as well as authoring several textbooks, including the Florida Exit Test Study Guide for Writing, the Florida Exit Test Study Guide for Reading, and an instructor's resource manual for empowered college reading. The 4th edition of her text, Reading Skills, published through Follett Bookstores and the Serious Academic Project, was released in August 2012. And here's no surprise. She's with us today as in the capacity of developmental educator par excellence. She is currently serving as the president of the National Association of Developmental Education. She's elected into that position in March of this year, just a short month ago. She has won many awards for outstanding faculty and for community service. So please help me provide a warm welcome to Patty Levine Brown.
Now, I said I was going to do this, and I need to do this because it's important. I want you to take a good look at me because I want to be the official poster girl for New Jersey. I want to be the adopted New Jersey girl. Okay? I love the state of New Jersey, and I want to tell you why. Over the years, the past 10 years, I have logged thousands of air miles, thousands of rail miles, thousands of car miles that I've driven across the country. I've spent a lot of time in New Jersey. This is the first time I've been in this part. But I will tell you that of all the states I've been in, and I say this sincerely, most of the nicest people I've ever met, some of the best food I've ever had, and some of the most beautiful landscapes I've ever seen have been in the state of New Jersey. You get a bad rap. If you need me, you call on me, okay? Call on me. New Jersey girl. Now, I want to start off by just mentioning a few names to you. And you probably, since most of you have been involved in student success over the years, you're going to know where I'm going with this. But I brought up my notes because I don't want to get the names confused. First of all, Henry Ford, R.H. Macy, F.W. Woolworth, Oprah Winfrey, Harry Truman, Abraham Lincoln, Bill Gates, Harlan David Sanders, also known as Colonel Sanders, Charles Darwin. Let's think about some writers and some well-known actors and actresses. Oliver Stone, Marilyn Monroe, Vincent van Gogh, Dr. Seuss, Steven Spielberg, Zane Grey, J.W. Rollins, one of the most widely published authors in the entire world and the most wealthy, by the way, Jack London, Mozart. Let's think of some sports. Oh, let me see. Walt Disney. I forgot about Walt Disney. Emily Dickinson. the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Michael Jordan. What do they all have in common? I know you know this. What do they all have in common? Okay, now I should have told you earlier, my head is stopped up, so speak up for me. What do they all have in common? They all did what the first go around? They failed. They absolutely, and some of them failed more than once. Abraham Lincoln failed about 16 times before he became Vice President of the United States and then became President. Okay? So they've all failed more than one time. And how many of you in here are faculty who deal directly with developmental students? Okay, I thought all of you. How many of our students have failed more than one time? They have failed more than one time. If not for developmental education, where might they be? If you want to know how successful developmental education is, talk to your students and talk to the faculty that teach it, because most of the faculty have stories. We're all here in developmental education because we have a story. I'm not going to bore you with my story, but I am going to tell you that I would not be here today if it hadn't been for a developmental math faculty member who not only helped me get through college algebra, God knows I needed the help, served as a mentor for me, encouraged me to go on, helped me get a scholarship when I got my bachelor's degree, told me to keep going, and I'm still going. So if you talk to any developmental educator, if you really talk to them, I guarantee you they have a story somewhere along the line. That's why they're in this business. We're in this business because somebody helped us, and most of us want to pass that on to those other people. While there may be a number of failures, have any of you ever had successful students that go on, have become doctors, lawyers, teachers, engineers? I have. Okay? So when you hear, I'm so encouraged today by what you said about developmental ed and the big idea. I like the big ideas concept. What matters is the meat of it. The title really doesn't matter. I was especially appreciative of what you said about adjunct faculty, because I did my practicum at Kellogg in setting up professional development programs for adjuncts, because 60% of our classes are taught by adjuncts. That's an aggregate number across the nation. That 60% of developmental education classes are taught by adjuncts. So that's a big impact on our students. We need to include those adjuncts in everything that we do. If you want good adjuncts, what do? You train them. Okay? Now I'm going to try to go back here. Darren has told me he'll help me if I mess this up. I hope you don't mind that I really prefer to have conversations with people. And let's see. Where am I? Okay. Down here? PowerPoint. Here we go. Yes, let me see if I can do this. Okay, set up slideshow. No, cancel that. From beginning. Hey, my training paid off, right? I like to have conversations with people. So if I walk up to you and I look directly at you, if you have questions during my presentation, don't hesitate to stop me. If something I say doesn't make any sense, and I do say things a lot of times, what did you say? That doesn't quite drive. So please bear with me. Don't you think this is a nice looking young man? Do you like the shoes? Like the hat? That's my adopted son. He's now 43 years old. He does not know I used his picture in this PowerPoint. So please don't text him or tell him, okay? But this is important. I think if we could get any message out of anything that anybody says about redesign in developmental education, and every state is talking about it, it would be that no one size fits all. Every institution is different. The size, your student population, the resources available to you, the training that your faculty has received, the number of adjunct faculty that you have working at your college, all of these things are factors. So one size will not fit all. So why do we redesign? Because hundreds of thousands of dollars, didn't we just hear this? Okay, the completion agenda is real important for us to pay attention to. It's important because if we don't change those numbers, somebody's going to come in and tell us what we have to do to change them. And I'll just mention to you briefly, and some of you may have already heard, and I had a conversation with two lovely ladies this morning. Where are they? I saw them. Hold your hand up. Where are you? There they are. That about what's going on in the state of Florida. And I will tell you that if you heard me talk about this, if you didn't roll your hair this morning or it got wet, it would curl. Okay? Yeah, it's messy, it's challenging, it's difficult. But it came about mainly because our legislature has said, you spent all this money, all these years. We're looking at the investment of taxpayer money. They're investing money and they're not getting a good return. So you will do this now. Instead of us being able to be a part of this conversation, we've been totally excluded from this conversation. And we're being told what we need to do. So one of the reasons you redesign. Now these figures that I'm using here, I had the pleasure of, how many of you have heard of Terry O'Banion? I think most people have read the Living and Learning, or the Learning College for the 21st Century. I had the pleasure of spending a couple of days with him in 2011 when he came to the University of Texas at Austin. I hosted him and had an opportunity to pick his brain for 2 days, and that was wonderful. But these numbers are a little old, but they come right out of a PowerPoint and a personal interview I conducted with him. 14% of community college students do not complete a single credit in their first term. That's a little high. I thought that was really high, but this 50% drop out by the second year, that's pretty common knowledge. A third never enroll in our courses. They're told you should go enroll, but they don't enroll. I've seen our counselors at my college actually chase students into the parking lot because they put them through orientation and they wanted them to go enroll in developmental courses, and they turned around and walked out and they went after them. Wait. You know? And only 10% ever attain the bachelor's degree. 10%. Now, this is me in the morning. Okay? There is a difference between the politics involved in this and the reality. And we need to look at both of them. And you need to be open to both of them. Because while we don't, let me rephrase that. While I don't like the politics of it, I understand it. And it's certainly a reality that you have to deal with the politics. Now, this is interesting, too. For nearly 150 years, people have been saying, oh, there's not going to be any need for developmental education, all these improvements and things in education. How many of you are familiar with Bob McCabe? Okay. You had somebody here from Miami-Dade in November, was it? Right? Miami-Dade College, or was it last year? Okay. Bob McCabe was the president of Miami-Dade Community College, when it was community college, for 25 years. And he's now retired, but he's a senior fellow emeritus with, I guess, the League of Innovation. He's done a lot of research in a lot in developmental ed, won tons of awards, very well respected nationwide. And you may have read one of his books, No One to Waste. Okay. In the community college, he pointed out in 2003 that there were so many students that were still coming to community colleges that were underprepared, that you would need developmental education throughout the first half of the 21st century. He also is the one, and I don't have this figure up here, but I want to let you know, he's also the one in that same book that says if you look at the millions and billions of dollars, literally, that are invested in higher education across this nation, and you look at it broken down, and you look at what is invested in developmental education, it's really a small fraction if you look at an overall picture. And he says, for the investment of what we put into developmental education, in higher education, it's really, he calls it the best bang for the buck. Okay. Economic return on investment. You hear that a lot from legislators. Are we going to continue to ask the taxpayers to pay for these courses over and over again? Or are we going to do something about it? Then you have those who say, well, remedial courses, students don't get it the first time, you need to give them a chance. Not everybody gets everything on the first go-around. Not everybody gets it on the second go-around. Sometimes it may take 3 and 4 times. The point is, how important is it to us as professionals that they get it? Do you want your students to get it? And you work hard to make sure they do. But some of them don't always get it the first time. Do they get it the second time sometimes? Sometimes they do. But the percentages continue to go up. Some students, yes, we know. Some students what? May not get it. But we have offered them what? The opportunity. What are we as educators? Are we, most educators that I know, and I'm defining this as the ones that I know and I've met, believe that education is the key to advancing, to progress, to, Glaze said, the enlightened society, okay? We have to have an educated public, an educated population. Least we have more problems nationwide if we don't. Somebody I listened to the other day was making a speech, and they were talking about developmental ed, and they said, well, somebody in the audience asked a question, and she just said, do you want to put money into programs or you want to build prisons? And I thought, that's putting it pretty straightforwardly. Because when people come into a situation where they don't feel they have opportunity, where there's no room for advancement, where there's no place for them to go, where there's no hope, what happens to the crime rate? Does it go up? It's bound to. It's bound to. But in community colleges, just different things, the things that we do in community colleges, the whole concept of the community college, which, you know, we're the first one that was created, Joliet, in 1901, was to give opportunity to people who did not have that opportunity previously. They didn't have opportunity. Their skill level might not have been as good as it should have been. They were underprepared, and guess what? They didn't have a lot of money. They couldn't afford to go to universities. Even if they could have gone through the selection process and made it, they couldn't get in. So we came along with something called what? Junior colleges, which then became what? Community colleges. And now in the state of Florida, a lot of those community colleges are referred to as state colleges. Okay? Do you have, how many state colleges? Do you have state colleges? How many, I mean, how many? I know you have them, but how many? Okay. Here's the reality of the situation. And this is, I wanted you to note the research. 60% of these students that are referred to us, one or more developmental courses, mostly developmental math. Mostly developmental math. In some community college, more than 90% of those students are deemed insufficient. They're not prepared. And there's a difference between being unprepared, underprepared, and not getting it. Okay? Underprepared is a very different context. That means you come to me, you came through high school, and maybe my curriculum's not aligned with you, and I test you in reading, and you never heard of patterns of organization. You don't know about strategies for reading, and you fail the test. It isn't because you can't learn. It's because what? You were exposed to it. Okay? 1/3 of the first-year college students require remedial education in reading, writing, or mathematics. Mostly, interestingly enough, in mathematics and reading. Okay? And those two are intertwined. If you've ever done any research in the area, students that don't read well, guess what? They're not good math students. Okay? And then, obviously, they probably don't write well either. I think you need to look at this 90%. Not only is that in the research, I interviewed one of your community college presidents about a year ago, and she told me that 90% of her students at her college come needing developmental education here in New Jersey. How many of you are familiar with the National Center for Developmental Education in Boone? Thank you. Okay. Hunter has always said to me, he's been my advisor and mentor for years. I used to work with the center. He's always said if a job is worth doing, well, particularly applicable to community colleges, okay, that it's time that we pay attention to how well we do it, is basically what he's saying. And it's important because these students who come to us needing remedial, and there's a difference between developmental education and remedial courses, and most of us understand that, I think, but I'll define that for you if you need me to. Those who come to us needing to take courses in developmental education. This is their first contact with any institution, any post-secondary institution that they've ever had. That experience needs to be positive. If you want to retain those students, if you want them to be successful, that contact needs to be positive. Many times, we talk about meeting students where they are, the first person they meet might be going into the registrar's office. That person's important too. Even if it's the person who answers the phone and says, "Good morning, Mercer County Community College, may I help you?" That person's important too. But for the student, their first initial contact is probably more important with who? That faculty member. Now let's start by looking at some of the principles that were developed between the National Center and NATE, the National Association. We put these, a lot of people have principles. We want you to see ours. We hope that you will like our principles. And I brought some extra copies in case you want to pass them out. And that you also were emailed the principles, I think. Were you not? But you're going to have the principle up here, and then I'm going to give you Patty's 2 cents after each principle, okay? So feel free to chime right in with Patty's 2 cents. Okay. Identify baseline performance before implementing mandates. Patty's 2 cents. If you don't know where you are, you don't know how to get there. How to get to the future. In other words, if you don't know where you start, how do you know where you're going to go? Right? So you identify those baseline performances so you know where you need to go. Well, I want to improve. Well, how much do you want to improve? 10%. Well, where are you now? If you're at 90%, that's pretty cool. You're going to go to 100. Okay, that's good. Include an evaluation plan to evaluate innovations. All I would say to you about that is if it doesn't work, it's not an innovation. So you need to evaluate what you're going to put your money, your talent, your investment behind. Okay? So if it doesn't work, it's not what? Not an innovation. Pilot innovations before you mandate them. This is so important because a lot of times we get these mandates and they don't really give us any time to pilot them. And that's important. If you don't train the people who are going to be doing the pilots, if you don't give them expectations as to what you hope to get, how do you expect them to know? So if you pilot the innovations, then you can really look to see, or the mandates, then you can look to see if it is an innovation. This is what I just said. Allow flexibility in that implementation. Keep in mind that different institutions will be able to use some innovations and others won't, depending on resources available. So you need to allow some flexibility. What might be very good here at Mercer might not work at Essex, but it could work if you allowed Essex to be more flexible or Mercer to be more flexible, whichever. Give them a little bit of time. Just like those students that don't make it on the first go-around. Provide for professional development. This means your faculty, full-time, and adjunct. Professional development is so important. I don't know that people realize just how important it is. How many of you in here have ever mentored an adjunct faculty member? Okay. Is it uncommon for in my adjunct experience, when I was an adjunct for 8 years, the first class I ever taught, they moved the class, told the students, and forgot to tell me. Okay, so I showed up at the wrong classroom. Didn't make a very good impression on my students that night. The second thing they did was when they finally located me, they figured out, they sent somebody to me that walked up to me, Eileen, and handed me a piece of paper that was then a syllabus that I had never seen before, and handed me a book and said, "My name is Eileen Abel, and I hope you have a good term. Call me if you need me." Didn't give me a phone number, just said, "Call me if you need me." Eileen! Did I have a clue what I was doing? Well, fortunately, I was a teacher. I had been trained. I had teaching courses, curriculum courses. I had methods courses. But do you know how many adjuncts we pull in that literally have no teaching background and had no courses in teaching? They don't know how to teach. They're very good. They know their content, but they don't know how to teach. So a mentor hopefully works with them to do some of those things. Right? There are no simple solutions. This is complicated. It's challenging. It's messy. It's painful, because change always is painful. I'm an advocate for change. I might not always like the way that it's given to me. I might not like it because sometimes it's shoved down my throat. I'm a person who likes to get consensus. Okay? If you have me on one of your committees, and I'm sitting across the table from a very analytical person who's like, boom, 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 do this, they're going to be so frustrated with me because I'm going to say, well, maybe I ought to think about this, or maybe I ought to think about this. And they're going to go, just make up your mind and do something. Make a decision. I can understand both sides of that. Right? But there's nothing simple about any of this. And I don't care which way you look at it. There's nothing simple about it. There's nothing simple about implementing it. There's nothing simple about training for it. There's nothing simple about deciding how it is done, where it's done, how you're going to do it, anything. Those implementing the innovations and the planning, what a novel idea. What a novel idea that is. How many things have I implemented that I was never involved in the planning process? So I'm implementing something that I really don't understand. I'm not sure of the history. I'm not sure if that history is political or not. Okay. Number 8 is the one that's so important to me. That's just my personal comment. Identify the impact of innovations on minorities and poor. Because in developmental education, that group, that population is overrepresented. If you do not offer them the opportunity and you tell them, like Florida's going to tell them, that you have one shot at doing this, otherwise we're going to send you to adult basic education, okay? You close the door on access and you limit educational opportunities to that group of students. You also have a lot of foundations now and the state of Florida who are talking about things called meta-majors. How many of you ever heard of meta-majors? Okay? Meta-majors are opportunities, and I don't disagree with the concept, but if you look at some of the principles that some of the foundations have, they talk about those academically challenged students. We're going to recommend that those academically challenged students, Ben, they're going to go into meta-majors, which means you might not be able to be a nurse, but you can be an LPN. Okay, that's okay. You might not be able to do this, but you can get a vocation or a trade that will put you to work and give you a certificate, so you're counted as a completer. Okay? But the courses you take in those meta-majors, guess what? They're not transferable to AA degrees or to a university. So we're basically doing what? We're cutting them off from what? They have to go back and try to get through those other courses in order to get the courses that count toward the AA that transfer into universities. Again, universities are a selection process. Okay? In Florida, you do have a law that says if you have an AA degree, we have to take you at our university. We don't have to take you in the program that you may want to go in, but we have to take you, do something with you. Now, community colleges for years have been beat up by universities for advising students to go vocational tracks, advising them to do certain things because they say that we should allow them to go into the AA tracks and transfer so they can get a bachelor's degree. So now the state of Florida is going to tell them, you can do this meta-major because you're too academically challenged to go. They're not going to say it that way, but they're saying you're too academically challenged. Okay, Faith, you can't do that because you just can't get through algebra and you can't get through, Comp 1. So I'm going to send you to I'm going to give you these lower level classes, basic math. You can do basic math, okay? And I'm going to get you don't have to do no algebra to get through this meta-major program, okay? You're just going to do basic math. But if you try to go to a university and transfer your basic math course, guess what's going to happen? Sorry, you got to go back and take what? College algebra, okay? Oh, this one's very important to me. I am where I am. I told you that because somebody was willing to step from behind a desk and help me. Most of my students are where they are because developmental educators and other educators and administrators have helped them. You come into this world, you may come in alone and you may go out by yourself. But I'm a firm believer that while you're here, you do what you accomplish. It's not only you, but it's other people who help you do that. We don't do these things by ourselves. We have people who believe in us, that support us. Hunter's been that kind of person for me. Hunter and Barbara, both. Barbara Bonham. They believed in me. They said, you can do this. And I'm trying. Identify what is already working well. This is so important. What is that phrase? Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Is that how it goes? If it's already working well, why are you going to have to take it and tear it apart and do it all over again? Now this happens too. This is important too when when you start looking at successes by institutions and by states, you need to ask them if they aggregate the data. But here's what happens. Let's say at Florida State College, we redesigned 3 years ago, and this year, in one of our academic success centers, in our developmental math, our highest level developmental math class, we broke 80% success rate for the first time in the history of our college. And at one point in time, Florida State College, they don't want me to say this, but it's true. If you looked at all the community colleges, 28 of them, we were at the very bottom in developmental math, our numbers. And now we're up close to the top. We're at least past the midpoint. So I have 80% success rate in that program. What XYZ institution over here may have 40%. So what they're going to do is they're going to average those numbers together and they're going to say, oh, statewide you got 60%. That's how you aggregate data. They don't look at individual institutions, and that's how you get nationwide statistics. And I understand that that's necessary. But when you start really looking for innovations, look at those institutions that have those very high success rates in whatever they're doing. Find out, can those things be implemented where I am? Are they something that would fit the population? You have to think about the community that surrounds you and their needs. You have to think about the population of your students, the high schools they're coming from, the time of day they take the classes, where they take the classes. Are you multi-campus, single campus, 80,000 students, 20,000 students? I mean, there's so much that I said it's not simple. Not simple. But things that are already working well may work well at your institution, but you may find what? They don't. But look at those things that are working well. So don't just look at the overall data. Talk to people at institutions. Get institutions to tell you what their success rates are. If you can get those from your institutional effectiveness people, they're pretty good about it. They get so excited when somebody wants to know what they do. I really highly value the people in institutional effectiveness. I do. I could never do their job, but I appreciate what they do, and I use their numbers all the time. Have any of you ever seen this article? You got the synopsis of it, but this is where it came from in the Journal of Developmental Education, Addressing Flawed Research in Developmental Education. Hunter and his colleague, Alexandros Gouros, I love his name, Gouros. They took some of this data nationwide that's being used by a lot of foundations that show developmental education success rates are poor, that we don't have, they looked at all of this and they said, well, you're right about some of this, but you haven't looked at the other side too, the other research that says it's not so bad over here. Okay? So we're going to talk just about a few of these, but you need to look at, before you make sweeping changes, you need to look at both sides of the spectrum here. You need to look at the data that says it does work and the data that says it doesn't, and you need to look at the two of them and see where they're coming together, if they are coming together at all. And I just picked out a few. And I want this is what the major points and then my 2 cents. Students who take remedial courses should outperform those who do not. This is a flaw. This is absolutely not what we're about. Okay? Students, in actuality, students who take remedial courses, they take those so they can get up to the level that those students that don't have to take remedial courses, they can get to the same level. That's what we do in developmental ed. We try to take those students who are underprepared, 15? Yep. Thank you, that are underprepared, and we try to get them up to the level where they need to be so they can meet other students at the same level in college credit classes. That's what we do. There may be other factors that affect the performance of developmental students in gateway courses. If you've ever taught developmental ed, it's not all about the content. Most of my students don't fail my classes because they can't pass them. They fail their classes because their work schedule changed. They don't have child care. They don't have transportation. They split up with their boyfriend or their husband or whomever, and they can't cope. Their lights get cut out. They get kicked out of their apartment. That's why they fail my classes. Not because they can't do the work. Lower level developmental students should be referred to adult education. This erodes the opportunity for minorities and poor. We're back to that principle that's really important to me, personally. Okay? I come to you with a high school diploma, maybe, okay, with college readiness. I think those programs, I like a lot of things they're doing to align the curriculum. We haven't had a chance to see a lot of change in Florida yet because we've just been doing it for a year or so. But getting everything in place, I think that you probably will see some changes in those coming from the high schools to the colleges being more prepared. However, the state of Florida, their own numbers will tell you that most of the students in developmental education are returning adults, non-traditional students. They're not right out of high school. So you're going to take those students that come to us. Patricia, you have a high school diploma from XYZ High School. Good for you. Unfortunately, you didn't do well enough in this course. I'm going to put you in adult basic education. You going to stay with me? Probably not. Probably not. Opportunity must not be confused with effectiveness. The thing is, what you don't want to do is set up a student for failure. Don't put them in a course they're not prepared to be in. While it's important that we look at, you've got students coming to you that are right on the cut score. They might be 1 or 2 points from going right into college credit versus taking a developmental course. Many of the innovations they're talking about nationwide, this includes embedded basic skills, this includes co-requisites, this includes modularization, all the accelerated programs, those will work for those students, most likely. Because they're already where? Right at the cut score. But those students who are way down here, no. They're going to be in those gatekeeper courses forever, and if you take them the first and tell them they got 1 shot and put them in ABE, it depends on how you look at it. Will it improve? Well, you can say that I got those top level students through, but what are you going to say about those bottom level students? You're going to put them in meta majors. That'll work. Meet them where they are academically. Meet them where they are. You want to put them on equal footing. That's all you're looking to do. Equal footing. They don't outperform those who don't need remediation because they were so far below to begin with. Now, developmental education has been viewed as a way to expand access and serve community workforce and economic needs. This is a democratic social view of developmental education. Opportunity, choice, hope. Okay? So, do you see it this way? Is this your reality, or is your reality the investment on your return? It costs too much money. We need to put an end to it. When you put an end to these programs, think about who you're also putting an end to. You're putting an end to students being successful. David Arundel. The first slide said that legislators have been saying this is going to go away for 150 years. You've seen some slides that talk to you about the democratic approach, hope, change, opportunity. However, the reality of it is that developmental education is necessary, it's needed, and the community colleges basically are the ones who have been said, what? You need to do this. Can't do it at the high school level. The state universities aren't going to do it. In the state of Florida, we have one state university in 100 years who's had permission to offer developmental education courses on their campus, such as Florida A&M University. However, this new bill does say that universities now will be able to contract with community colleges and possibly privatize sources to offer developmental education on any university campus. It gives them the option to do that. Of course, I haven't seen the final, nothing's passed yet, and I haven't seen the final revision of what will pass, so I have no idea at this point. But right now, it's still what? The job of what? The community colleges to offer this. Same thing I say, it's not easy, it's messy. This looks like my office. What do you like? You like that? Actually, my office looks worse than that, but that was just a cleaned up picture. I'd like to invite you to visit the website, the NAID website. I'd like you to look at some of the things we're doing. We have a bunch of success stories that are up on our website now from Florida. I'd love to have success stories from other states to put up on the website that show people what people are doing in developmental ed. These are administrators, teachers, and students that wrote stories that were published in the state of Florida. So if you have anything like that, if you could work with me on something like that for the NAID website, I would be appreciative. Also, I'd like you to visit the website for the National Center for Developmental Education. You'll be able to see Hunter's article. You can see these principles. These principles are also up on our website. Any questions that you have, I'd be happy to entertain them at this point or have a conversation with you if you'd like. And I hope that in the afternoon I can continue that conversation, so please feel free. Can you have a microphone? Because I'm not going to be able to hear you from down here. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to overlook you.
I got the microphone first now.
You said earlier that
you said earlier that you would give us your definition of remedial versus developmental, and I was hoping that you would make good on that promise.
Okay. And this is some of the research, and then again, this is Patty's input. Okay. And if I may start with an analogy. If I have a bad cut, I wash it, I put ointment on it, and I put a Band-Aid on it, okay? But I go through a process of healing, of continued things that I do over a period of time to heal that cut, okay? That's a developmental education program. We have a lot of things under one umbrella that allow a student options to be successful. It might be more than one course. It might be more than one way of doing it. They have referral services if they have those problems where they can't, if it's more than content and their lights are cut off, their kids don't have child care. This is all under a developmental education program. If I remediate you, if you come to me and you have a particular problem with a skill in math, and I say, oh, Kelly, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to remediate you. I'm going to take you over here to this table and I'm going to help you learn the associative property or distributive properties. I'm going to work on that with you. That's remediation of a skill. I remediate you. And then, but I only do one or two things, okay? Or the cut, I don't wash it, I don't put the ointment on it, I just put a Band-Aid on it and I say, go out and play. You're okay. Okay? I remediate you at the time when you need it about a particular skill. But if you're in a developmental education course, we start you from the beginning and take you to a certain point that helps you understand how to make that transition into the next level. Okay? So does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Your question, Cynthia.
Yes, my question.
Hi, Cynthia. Hi. Where are you from? Oh, Raritan Valley. That's a beautiful campus.
Yes, it is.
I saw the deer grazing in the...
Yeah, be careful when they're crossing in front of you when
That's
you
what I'm
leave
telling you.
campus
New
at
Jersey
dusk.
gets a bad rap.
My question is regarding this article you were just referring to, the knee-jerk reaction to developmental education and some of the things that we perhaps should not be doing. And we're doing a lot at Raritan Valley, like a lot of other schools. And you mentioned about replacing prerequisites with co-requisites, and we're offering a lot of co-requisite courses, or beginning to offer co-requisite courses.
Well, they're looking at it. That is a... I don't want to mention names. So one of the foundations that's been highly successful in going into states and doing away with a lot of is touting co-requisites. Co-requisite would be they would be taking a college credit class along with maybe a 1 credit or 2 credit or a module of so it's a co-requisite instead. Now the embedded The embedded is an interesting thing to look at. And I say this, and I don't mean to offend anybody in this room, but I will tell you that of the hundreds of faculty members I've talked to across the nation about developmental ed, a lot of those have been college credit faculty. And it's our own fault that we don't really tell them more about what we do. But I have had a number of people at colleges and universities and community colleges that don't teach Dev Ed refer to developmental education as those courses, those teachers, and those students. Well, they're our courses, our teachers, and our students. And my students don't wear a sign when they come into college credit math saying, I'm a developmental education student, that lights up and says so they'll know. So unless you go look at their record, you don't know where they came from. So my question is, if I'm teaching college algebra and I have chosen not to ever teach developmental education, and I don't want to teach developmental education, but you're going to put those students in my classes, and now I'm expected to also teach, along with my college credit curriculum, embedded basic skills, how good of a job am I going to do, or am I going to do it at all?
So the courses themselves, that organization of the courses is not inherently bad, but perhaps if the wrong person is teaching it?
Well, I'm not saying that it depends on how you organize it. Are you going to have it team taught? Is there going to be a developmental educator in there with you? Is there going to be, are you going to expect that college credit faculty? And it turns down to load. I mean, if you change all of this, right now, I choose to teach developmental education. Have I ever taught English comp? Absolutely. Have I ever taught literature? Absolutely. Do I love teaching those courses? Absolutely. Do I love teaching developmental writing? Yes, I do. Developmental reading? Yes, I do. I choose to teach those courses. If I'm putting what I teach as a choice into somebody's course who doesn't choose to teach them, and I don't have any training on how to teach basic skills or development, and it is training. I mean, you think, well, I'm a math major, I can do this. Well, you probably can, but it's the way you do it. It's how you do it. When do you embed it? What do you say here? What do you do there? If I've had no training on that, I don't know what that looks like. So, I'm hoping to be able to tell you in a year if I've survived it all. I told you that, did I tell you the reason I wore my hair up today? Somebody's told me, I tell it all the time, that picture doesn't look like me because my hair is down and all of that. I wore my hair up today because I wanted you to see all the gray that I'm getting. I'm serious. My hair in the last 6 months, with all the stuff that's happening, it's just gray. Gray! And I'm thinking, maybe I just need to let people see it. It needs to be something I wear in honor, okay? But it's just, so please, understand, I'm honored.
Patty, last question.
Patty,
Questions? Eileen,
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm good. I just want to pick up on something that you were just talking about up there, and that is certainly it's incumbent on institutions to make sure that they give faculty the tools and the skills to go into the developmental education classroom. Because I do think frequently what happens, I know even at our own institution, we do have a cadre of people who are dedicated and who really know what happens in the Dev Ed classroom. Mm-hmm. But when half of those, or more than half of those classes are taught by adjuncts who don't necessarily either have the background or the predilection to be in there, it becomes those students. So I know that some of your research actually has been on the characteristics, the best characteristics of faculty in the Dev Ed classroom. And I wonder if you would share with that group what some of those characteristics are, so that's the kind of thing that we can talk about cultivating on our campus.
Okay. Characteristics of anybody who teaches Dev Ed in classroom? Okay. First and foremost, I think it needs to be somebody who wants to do it. That characteristic is very important. When we went to our academic success centers, we literally ask everybody to interview, because we have a tendency to hire people in Dev Ed that don't have any training. I mean, associate deans and associate deans, I fully appreciate their situation. They're tasked with filling those classes and getting a teacher in those classes, and sometimes they don't have a lot of choices. And a lot of our adjuncts, for example, were just literally pulled off the street at the last minute to fill a class. Not only did I know anything about the class or Dev Ed, they've never taught. So we asked people we wanted people to go into the academic success centers who wanted to be there. If you don't want to teach developmental education, if you see them as those students that shouldn't be here, then please do not teach here, not in the Academic Success Center. So first of all, you want somebody in those classrooms that wants to teach developmental education students. Somebody who sees what they're doing as an opportunity to help students move up, okay? Not as just something that's being done because they have to. Somebody who is flexible, patient, understanding, one who will walk them and be involved with them. The tutoring centers, the learning centers are a very important part of developmental education programs. Most people don't realize how important they are. Those tutors that work in there, those students that are supplemental instruction, all of those things that go on in your learning centers. I don't tell my students, I've seen this hundreds of times, in your syllabus you will go, you will do, blah, blah. You never see the instructor in there. I walk my students. I give them an orientation. I tell them what's expected of them. And they will rise to the occasion. But you have to tell them. It's kind of like you have to include the people in the planning process that you want to put in those innovations. You need to include the students. If you want a student to do something, you need to ask them. You need to explain to them how you want it done. And not somebody who just knows the content, but somebody who knows how to be flexible in how they administer that content. I found that some of the best developmental education teachers, they incorporate numerous teaching practices within their classroom. They understand that lecture is probably not going to work with these students if that's all you ever do. Okay? We have some very talented lecturers in this country, though I can tell you, I'm enamored by a lot of them. But in developmental education, these students have pretty much been told all their lives that they're failures. These people told that too. I don't know if Bill Gates is considered a failure today or not. The guy who told the Beatles that they would never go anywhere probably is selling pencils on the street corner somewhere. Okay? But the man that told Elvis Presley to go back and drive a truck because he'd never make it in this music business is probably, who knows. You don't want somebody in your classroom like that that doesn't encourage students, that lets them know they can do this. They need to, the first point of contact, remember what I said about the first point of contact? Usually is that teacher that forms that relationship with that student. Research will tell you, other than Hunter's research, but other research will also tell you that the number one determining factor in the success of students in the classroom is still who? Teacher. That relationship they form with that teacher. Is that teacher somebody who's willing to form those kinds of relationships? And I say that very liberally because some relationships don't get there. Okay? But the relationship you perform, and that is that you form with those students to be encouraging, to build their self-confidence, build their self-esteem, that you include things such as lecture, cooperative learning activities, small group learning, collaborative learning, infuse technology in your classroom and in the labs. You use the learning labs. Because there's so many students, they learn differently. They're like all the rest of us. There are different levels of learning, different ways of learning. You want to cover the gamut. So that teacher needs to incorporate that in their syllabus and in their activities that they do. That can meet most of the students. We've been told for years that in public schools, unfortunately, what do we have to do? We've got the gifted students, we've got the low-level students, and the students in the middle. What do? We're taught to teach to the middle, right? Because we hope the gifted students will do okay on their own, and we're hoping that we can pull up some of the lower-level students. But we teach to the middle. Try to find ways that go beyond teaching to the middle. Peer editing, peer tutoring, and peer editing in my writing classes, they know what I say, but it's also very helpful for them to have a partner in the classroom that they can hear what they have to say about what they wrote. And it doesn't have to be announced in the classroom, but those two people work together, and I work with them. So these small groups, that training, the professional development training is so important for anybody that's in the classroom, especially developmental educators and adjuncts. So that part is the resource from your college. a lot of wonderful administrators I've met here in New Jersey that have a very good attitude about professional development. They understand it, they know its importance. If you want somebody to do a good job, you teach them how to do it first, and then you let them go out, and you let them teach to the masses.
Patty? That's the voice
Huh?
of God.
Okay. Well, that ends that. That was a pretty good note. End on. Teach to the masses.
We're just about out of time. I'd like to ask the audience to thank Professor Patty Levine Brown for joining us today.